Hey guys, this is going to be a very personal video. It's going to discuss a lot of heavy topics, and if I get emotional, I'm sorry. That's kind of why I didn't wear makeup, just in case, because like I don't need anything running on my face. Just, if I cry, I want to cut it out and it won't show, besides maybe like red eyes, you know what I mean? So that being said, please be mindful of the subjects the video might possess and myself, because I'm sharing really deeply intimate things. And the reason I want to speak out about it now is because I've been wanting to do a Lisa the Painful video. And now like I've been inspired to do Martha because those two games have affected me like deeply. To the point where like I cried on stream with Lisa, I couldn't hold it in, and Martha, I nearly did. I also had like no idea how to go about making the video. Like I did scripts, I wrote about the games a couple times. I just didn't know how I wanted to convey my message or like how I related and connected. And I tried to do it in a way where it was not very personal and it was very vague, but that kind of just made things worse. It didn't work in the way I needed it to. And then I finally figured it out after playing Martha and talking to people about it. And also like I never really felt my story was unique at all with my upbringing, because the whole old adage like everyone is struggling with their own battle. I interpreted that something different. Like if I had to compare it, it's gonna make no sense. I hope it does, but I always compared it to like numbers. If my life upbringing was a 10, like that was the scale, I always imagined other people's lives and tribulations would also amount to a 10 eventually, maybe through different situations, or maybe it's like small problems that happen that accumulates to the number 10, like everybody fulfills the number 10 in short, like regardless of how they get it, whether it's one big trauma or multiple minor traumas along the way. When I was playing these two games and it was Martha that kind of broke that barrier down, I kind of began to realize that not everybody's life is like that. Not everybody's life is a 10, and it's not normal for it to be a 10. And that realization was gut-wrenching. I'm not sitting here to be like trying to like make this a pain or trauma Olympics. Genuinely found comfort believing that everybody was struggling with life like I was. And then that was all shattered. I was confronted with that. They weren't. Like in truth, I minimized my own trauma and past in a way to cope, because how could I not? Everyone is struggling in their own way, right? This has to be normal. Everybody goes through their own story, right? I thought like I wasn't alone, and now I truly feel more alone on my journey through these. Sorry. Why am I saying sorry? You're my webcam. Silly goose. But now I do feel more alone on my journey through these pivotal games that I just really happened across. Like, I found Martha is dead through a random article I saw. And I just got it. Like I was more excited for that game than I was for Elden Ring. Like I'm being honest. Like I was really excited, and I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. And I got told about Lisa the Painful from my friend Shane, who I was like rooming with, I think at the time, and he recommended it to me. And at first I played it and it didn't click. Like I was confused. I was lost. Like I didn't understand what I had to do. And then I replayed it again years later. I think this was like 2014. I played it 2019 or 2020. It's been a long time. So I managed to pick it up again and I stuck with it. It was almost like it was fate and foretold in my own cards of, tarot deck. My own little white lady speaking to me about how the truth was within me all along and that I will find the truth. This video will have a lot of major and minor spoilers. If any of these two games interest you, please do not watch this video and pick up those games. Or if you've only played one and not the other, you can stay to this minute mark for Lisa analysis, or you can skip to this minute mark where Martha is dead segment. I'll let you decide right now, give you a few seconds. You're still here? I'll start with my own experience with Lisa the Painful. I'm not going to discuss everything that happens within the game because there is a lot. This will be more in depth with how it related to me and how it affected me in the key moments. Lisa the Painful is the second game within the Lisa franchise. You follow a main character named Brad. Brad was a deeply troubled man in his path. His sister committed probably the only thing that can silence a life forever. Brad felt that it was all his fault. He did this, but he was only a child as well. How could he protect Lisa from the savage abuse from their father? He grew up trying to help children though, via like being martial arts teacher, which I assume was like in his hopes to maybe atone for what he believed is a failure of saving his own sister from his father. He even took in a small adult or teen named Dusty. Brad basically adopted Dusty in as his own son. Brad also struggled with a joy addiction, which is in-game a drug. And we come to find out by playing that the setting is apocalyptical and the women all have just suddenly vanished. We've met many men, widows, even some happy that they're gone, many missing family members, and now having to navigate a new world. It's bleak, it's sad, and thankfully the game manages to kind of keep spirits high with humor. It's a really funny game. It has great humor, great moments. It's great. I highly recommend you to play it. However, Brad found something, or matter someone. It was Buddy. Buddy is an infant girl he happened across alone in the midst of a desertscape, and he was shocked to find her. Quickly realized what it meant, finding the only girl in the world. Unfortunately, Brad also knew that even though this new hope for the world to being able to repopulate and save it, right, it also means that this little girl that he found is also destined to be manipulated and having her childhood stolen from her and then help repopulate the world by force. And at that moment, he dedicated his life to give Buddy a childhood and a life that he couldn't give his sister Lisa, who still haunts them in this game. This little girl even made Brad swear off joy himself. Buddy would grow up in a relatively normal childhood with Brad being her surrogate father in a way, and his friends were all like her uncles. It was really cute. Although sheltered from the world, Brad made do on raising her until Buddy reached puberty. Buddy was taken, leaving only one of her beloved uncles on the floor bleeding out to deliver the final message to Brad. Simply said, "Brad, they got her." This small summary of the game spoke to me in a way, because I had a stepdad who also found me when I was really young. I was running down a dirt road naked. I guess I was a natural born nudist. I don't know what to tell you. And he kind of adopted me in a similar fashion and acted as though I was like his own blood. I identified with Buddy in ways, and I saw that Brad was my dad and others. Buddy was convinced by everyone that she was the savior of the world and that she was going to do an important job that everybody needed, constituted as. She just knew that she was important and that this is a choice she can choose. She was just a child though. She couldn't even imagine what all that she would be forced to do would entail. Brad kept chasing Buddy to save her from this ill fate to be basically a breeding cow. Was it selfish? A lot of people have this argument that Brad is a selfish character. Some people even take the stance that he was an awful person. Brad wanted to keep Buddy so that she can basically have a childhood and grow up in a healthy family lifestyle as close as possible. He wanted to give her a life that she just would avoid being abused. He wanted to avoid her becoming like Lisa. The world was actually in danger though, and they did need Buddy, like the world did need Buddy, but Brad wanted her to stay a child just a bit longer. Buddy became resentful of this though, resentful of Brad through his efforts to trying to save her, and this caused Buddy to believe that they hated Brad. That kind of brought me back to my own issues with my birth father not wanting me, neglecting me both financially and emotionally. I was angry and resentful. I was upset when my stepdad, who was really my dad, took care of me. And I cannot say I was always perfect. I definitely was a problem child in some regards. I wasn't a bad kid, but I did have issues, of course. I definitely did and said stuff that was probably hurtful to him, just like Buddy lashing out at Brad. But you know what my dad did? He kept chasing me. My dad kept ensuring that my life would be okay and that I would be safe from all the horrors of the world might have for me. All the things I didn't understand at the time. I was angry, but he understood, even though sometimes he did get upset back. Like, I wasn't perfect, he wasn't perfect, but he was definitely the best dad I could have asked for. The most painful part of the story for me was Brad chose to sacrifice his arms instead of his friends and his team. Because you get this choice. So depending on what the player chooses, you can make Brad even more selfish by allowing his friends to die just so that he can keep his arms. And for me, unfortunately, it was always Terry. Every kidnapping, every time Buzzo, or I can't remember the other guy's name, every time anything comes up, it's always Terry in the spotlight. And at a certain point, I believe that this was all like a telegraph, like it was on purpose by the game, right? Like the game coded it so that it would always be Terry. But no, the funny thing is it's all RNG. The game just managed to pick Terry out of the huge selection of teammates that I have accrued throughout the whole game. It was quite impressive. I think the game wanted to kill Terry through my playthrough, but Brad wouldn't let him. A huge part of the story is that Buzzo forced Brad to consume Joy, something that he quit and swore off. But really, in truth, Brad was doomed from the start of the game. I, as Brad, was soon to become a Joy mutant. This is all the consequences of this drug that Brad has been taking throughout his life. He wouldn't stop until he saved Buddy, even if it meant him dying. And it got painful in the end. You finally have this heroic stand with Rando, the key antagonist who wishes to have Buddy for repopulation. You think it's gonna go smoothly, but it doesn't. Your teammates see what's happening, they understood the situation, and they condemn you, they leave you, and they fight against you because they believed that Buddy was the answers for all their problems and wanted to stop Brad from saving the world, essentially. Brad persevered through fighting his friends, which depending on who you bring to the fight as your teammates, some of them won't even fight back. Sometimes they just outright cry because they did not want it to happen. So it just becomes more impactful for what Brad was doing to the people that he didn't give up his arms for. But now it's either Buddy or them, and he picked Buddy. Finally get to Rando. Through this whole time in this game, Rando is evident to be a man of peace. Like, he's not this terrible guy. He isn't violent, and he just believes in saving the world. The intentions are just and true, and I honestly can't fault Rando. How come they just couldn't let Buddy be a kid just a little while longer? I couldn't help but think Brad is right in all of this in his way too. And you know, when you're fighting Rando, it's inevitable. You see like his moveset and you listen to the music and you see Rando's reactions and you slowly start to realize something.
Is this the disciple I invited to my karate? No, dude, don't do this. That's why he was so nice to me. God. Okay, hang on. Give me a second. Okay. Oh my god, dude. That's why he was crying, yeah.
That Rando was Dusty Armstrong. Rando was Brad's adopted son. Only the player knows this because all Brad could see was red, and Rando never even said his true identity. It's just up to the player to recognize the moveset and his behavior, because all Brad could really see or notice is just saving Buddy. Unfortunately, at that time, he was succumbing to his ultimate demise. So you kill your son, you're gravely injured, and you go to Buddy, who hates you. And Buddy aggressively interrogating Brad about why was he not there when she needed him, and why he has taken everything from her, as Brad has killed her uncles, even one who assaulted Buddy, and he said he did it to ensure the future was safe and secure. Brad knew, but Buddy didn't. Buddy didn't know the full scale of what that meant. She just thought she was doing the best thing for the world. As she berates Brad about how much he has hurt her, Brad only just pleads for her to stop. He already knows that she hates him, but all he saw and made sure of that she was safe in the end. Buddy only knew the lies that were fed to her, and Brad knew the truth, that Buddy just didn't know better, and that her heart is in the right place, but she doesn't know. And he says, for good or for evil, it doesn't matter. Those men wanted to use you. People are always going to try to use you and hurt you. He wanted her to actually choose her life for herself rather than the propaganda that was fed to her by Rando and her uncles. Buddy is a realistic child. She is still upset. She's still mad that Brad is being the father she should have had a long time ago from the start. Just like how my dad wasn't there to be my father, and I had to endure all that I had with my mom until she married him. Until I was like 8 years old. I had my stepdad when I was 8. I just was upset that the world has given me the cards that I was dealt. I just wish I had my real dad sooner, my stepdad. But that wasn't just the reality, but my dad was there now when I was 8. He wouldn't let anybody hurt me like Brad wouldn't let anybody hurt Buddy, even if it was too late. And in the end, tragically, Brad asks Buddy to hold him as he dies, and Buddy does hold him. And Brad then asks, did I do the right thing? And I'm sure my dad asked himself a lot if he was a good enough dad for me. I'm not saying Brad and my dad are like the same. It's not a one-to-one, and Buddy and I are definitely different with how the situation happened. Like, the concept is similar enough, you know? I'm not the only woman in the world, and he's not a joy-addicted monster. You know, a daughter holds contempt for her situation, blames it on her dad who loves her. The dad, knowing what his daughter has gone through and is naive, but understands and sympathizes with their daughter, but knows what is ultimately best for her. They both, Brad and my dad, did just do that, and it was enough. It does get a little bit heavier though. There's a sequel or a follow-up called Lisa the Joyful. It's like basically DLC for Lisa the Painful. And Joyful focuses around Buddy, where she has to face her traumas and distrust for people. And even like finding that Rando didn't actually die. Dusty is still alive, and Dusty, just like Brad, dedicated to keeping Buddy safe, as his whole crew did die, so the safety of his compound was compromised. There's no safety now in this mission of repopulating the world just yet. Buddy had to face her own guilt and her own rage of Brad, her dad, realizing that Brad did love her in all stages of life. Knowing Brad was not perfect, but he did his best with what he knew. And Brad did legitimately love Buddy as his own daughter, but didn't know how to come to terms with it as it scared him. He didn't know how he felt about being genuinely in love with his daughter. Was, I guess, not ready to being an official dad, but it was already too late. He was basically her dad at that point, whether or not he donned the title or not. And it kind of like brought me back because a little bit later in my life, after my dad's passing in 2015, I heard that he wanted to adopt me officially after he was gone. And I was gonna ask him too, probably around a month or two after his passing. That was the plan. And we both had the same idea, and finding that out when it was too late was heartbreaking. Hearing how much my dad loved me, and I couldn't even really say goodbye or even talk or resolve things between he and I at the time. It was a very volatile situation between me and my family at that part of life. We were all working through something together, so I wasn't really able to say sorry to him and all the things that I wanted to say. I had to go through my own realizations of anger, guilt, and more, just like Buddy did. In the end, Buddy did take the vaccine to cure her from being a joy mutant, as she did take joy before. And when she takes the vaccine, she goes into the cave and she sees Brad with a red guitar, only to vanish, seemingly to indicate that Brad will always be with her. Even like past enemies such as Buzzo came to tell Buddy that Brad was a good man. And he was someone that in all parts of the game talked down to Brad, challenged Brad, threatened Brad, forced him to essentially be fated to death by consuming joy, cursed him for the loss of Lisa, his own friend and Brad's sister. In the end, Buzzo said Brad was saved by Buddy, and Buddy asked if the scientist that claimed to be her father in the end was really her dad, only for Buzzo to say, no, Brad is your father. He loved you so much. And that hit me hard. You know, because my dad wasn't someone that birthed me, but he was my father in that same sense. My dad loved me so much, and just like what Buddy was told by Buzzo at the end of the game, I truly felt like in a weird way I related with these characters, and it kind of like in a way brought me to my knees emotionally. I played it a long time ago too, and I still cry about it when I think about it because it makes me feel and acknowledge how my dad was similar to Brad and I was Buddy to him, and how similar we were and how much it was a genuine love. I'm not even gonna lie to you, like Lisa the Painful is probably my #1 favorite game like ever. And like while I'm kind of giving you light on how like Lisa affected me personally, I now have to like talk about Martha's Dead, and that one made me realize something crucial. I'll give you the rundown of how the game is before I tell you why this game was extremely impactful for me and why I just can't stop thinking about it. The game itself isn't anything revolutionary. I'll be honest, it's basically just a walking simulation interactive novel with very light mechanics. It's also, but it's really cool because it's set in Italy during 1944, just before Italy left the Axis powers to join the Allies, which was very interesting to me because there's a lot of games surrounding Germany, Soviet Union, and sometimes Japan, and I feel like Italy just kind of gets forgotten, and any story focuses around World War II. It's like they kind of just like got out scot-free. In this story, you follow a titular character named Julia, living in her nanny's old villa, whose father's also a Nazi/German general, as she ventures forth to uncovering the death of her poor twin sister, Martha. And by doing so, you traverse the game doing various tasks, such as taking photos and completing quests, such as like reading the newspaper. And that's only because Martha did it. And in this game, we're also pretending to be Martha. The basic rundown of this is, Julia is now Martha in the game due to the untimely events of her finding and pulling Martha out of the lake, dead, and her mother found her and Julia, but mistakes Julia as Martha. And one of the reasons in the game that they give that why she thought that was nobody but Lapo could tell them apart. Like nobody could tell Julia from Martha apart. They looked that identical. And Julia was always like treated poorly by their mother. So she pretended to be Martha from then on. She basically just rolled with it, in other words, because the affection she was getting at the time is something that she always wished to have. Like going through the game, you learn about their interpersonal relationships, of course, such as her father who doted on Julia despite his background being a German general, and Lapo, who was her close friend who always could tell Martha and Julia apart and fought with the Italian rebel party. Her nanny was basically her surrogate mother, as Julia's real mother seemed to only love Martha and demonize Julia. Irene, who is Julia and Martha's mother, is spiteful at the fact that her husband is just always gone and seemingly only abuses Julia, as Martha's like the golden child here. It was always Julia's fault in Irene's eyes for everything. Julia was the reason why Irene couldn't get pregnant. Julia was the reason why her sister was deaf. Julia was at fault for every minor or major thing, such as just simply as breaking a vase as a child. No matter how great or minor, this was a major misstep in the eyes of their mother. While following the game, our goal is essentially just like taking photos and printing them out as evidence, or just because we can, which is honestly like a really cute feature. They give you a lot of like attachments and even skins for the camera, and the camera mechanic in the game came in handy because sometimes your lighter just won't come out for whatever reason. Like I keep trying to bring it out in dark areas, it just won't. It never came out when I needed it. So I just whipped out the camera and put the night lens on so that I can see through the dark and just kind of like crawl or trudge through to my objective. It was very slow, but it worked, and I felt like a genius, so that was cool. While we take photos and do detective work, we basically have the choice to help the Italian rebel forces or to support and trust our father instead. There's like really cool, neat things here and there, and it even gives you like little hints that kind of tells you the real truth of what's going on. Even like when you have nightmares, it kind of gives you the glimpse of what maybe Martha is trying to tell you from perhaps beyond. So I kind of related to Julia in this sense, purely because like I have frequent nightmares. Like my whole life, I've been plagued by nightmares every night, like nearly every night. And if it's not every night, I have like something weird or strange or like uncomfortable that happens in my dreams. If they're not just outright scary nightmare, it's fine. I guess I'll take that over being scared every night, but I relate to that on that kind of level. And also, like when you progress deeper, Julia has no choice but to contact a childhood legend, the White Lady, as previously mentioned. Julia's nanny would always read her the White Lady's tale at the begging request of little Julia. Nanny always warned that the White Lady always killed young women during foggy weather and that wanders close to the lake. And that very lake is actually behind her nanny's estate, where at the time Julia's family resided due to the dangers of the current events at the time. But like Julia didn't care about the risk with the White Lady. She loved the White Lady despite her being scary to her. And Nanny did say if you love the White Lady, you might be spared, so I guess it's safe for Julia. The White Lady's reasons for killing young women is because her lover thought that she was cheating and basically drowned her in that lake that she resided in. He did confess to the community because he was so guilty of what he has done, and they hung him for it. From then on, the White Lady seeks relief from her torment by finding young women and killing them to get temporary relief from her death. pain of her death. Sometimes if she takes pity on you though, she'll let you go. This is a lot of setup for the next few parts I'm gonna share from here. Also just major, massive spoilers. I know that I already said this before at the beginning, like multiple times before. If you've been saying here all this time and this game sounds interesting to you, turn away, go play it. We're going in now. Also just another warning as well. There's a lot of sensitive content here, such as like self-harm, sexual content, abuse, and a lot more worse things are in this game. If you're sensitive to any of these deeper topics, please turn away now from the video. Martha's death affected me in ways I didn't really expect. It was a rather personal experience that I shared on stream, and I don't think the viewers at the time realized the truth of what I felt about it and more and what happened. At the time, I kind of did play it off awkwardly with like laughing and trying to make jokes, which I realize now it seems insensitive, but I hope that you kind of understood why I did that. Because like when playing the game, we find photos from a camera that we set out near the lake to capture the environment, as Julia was a very avid photographer, and we found a few things that were really concerning, and we're kind of faced with having to deal with our mother, who didn't seem concerned about having Julia's dead corpse next to the real Julia, who she calls Martha. Like we even find a fabric that Irene uses for her own clothing, and it's like hung on the bushes near where Martha was found dead. And you can even find like the scraps of the same fabric like near her sewing machine, so it wasn't even like well hidden. It was laid out in plain sight. I feel like it's a very purposeful tactic from the game developers to kind of tell you like, hey look, it's Irene's fault that did this. And Julia was more than happy to be Martha, even though she regrets stealing her identity as shown in numerous night terrors. She just like felt overwhelming comfort when her mother called her Martha and held her, because it was a moment that she never really had, as Irene hated Julia, so she just kind of ran with it. And it wasn't long until the guilt made it unbearable that she couldn't help but break the secret by playing piano. It was literally like 7 days later, which we know Martha can't know how to play piano because Martha is deaf. Julia just could not stand the insurmountable guilt of stealing Martha's identity, and she couldn't bear to see her father mourn for Julia when it wasn't her, it was Martha that was dead. She would rather face punishment than to continue to lie. So she played music, something that Julia always did, and she was of course in trouble for pretending to be Martha, but at least Julia reclaimed her identity, or did she? She still is tormented by her twin's death. She still didn't have enough evidence to pin it on her mother. She needed more proof. She had to talk to the White Lady at this point. She had to know. Luckily at this point, a very convenient call came through from our nanny, and we told her that we're actually Julia, and we asked how to summon the White Lady, and it was oddly simple enough. You wait for a foggy time of day, and you find a personal item of her lover that connects him to the world, photo of said lover, a lock of your own hair, and tarot cards to communicate. After you acquire all these said things, all you have to really do is use the boat to get to the island to do the ritual, which admittedly disappoints Julia. She never really got the answer that she wanted. The White Lady didn't know who killed Martha. She did give comfort, saying Julia will remember and find all the answers on her own. Weirdly enough, past this, you witness a time jump, and she kind of like resurfaces up out of the water, and you're in the bathtub holding a key in hand. And this key is for Martha's personal lockbox to see if there's any proof, evidence, anything for Julia to use as evidence. And there was a letter that reads Martha was pregnant from Lapo, and Martha in the letter seems very unstable, or at least extremely stressed out by this time due to her pregnancy, and wanted to tell Julia. And I guess she assumed Julia would find Martha's note at some point. And Martha confesses that she was not actually deaf. She just chooses to not speak or react to hearing to people. She also felt remorse for her mother treating her better than Julia, and felt that Julia deserved to live Martha's life. And so what did she do? She left a note on her mother's desk reading, Julia is pregnant, come to the lake in the early morning to see her belly as she bathes. And you know, Martha is pretending to be Julia at this point, goes to the lake, like says all the things Julia could have wanted to say to her mother and be her voice and see what comes of it. Martha knows that she might die in this exchange, but she doesn't care because Julia was always Martha's voice, and now is the time for Martha to finally be Julia's voice at this moment. And you know what's weird? You would think, like, there we have it, you know, Irene killed Martha. We have a motive for why she did it. I guess it's just time to prove that Martha was actually pregnant so that it was more absolute and undeniable at this point. And as well developed the photo from the lake's camera that we never developed of the morning of the murder. And the issue is at this point, after finding out Martha is actually Julia, and Martha's dead and Julia's alive, Irene, her mother, called a doctor just to institutionalize Julia for being crazy due to her failed attempt to what appears to be murder and murdering Martha instead on accident to cover her tracks. It's basically a race against time now. Like, Irene was simply just waiting for the officials to take Julia away. But of course, Julia does manage to beat the time and race. It's a little graphic and grim, but we do cut out the fetus and we allow Martha to finally hold her baby. So it's kind of nice. As awful as it sounds, we did have to take a photo for proof, and then we returned home. And it was time to wrap everything up and to interrogate our mother for a confession finally. We even stole a pistol from her father's nightstand, and she was confident that she would get the answers that she needed so badly about Martha. We arrived home, but it's like really weird because the time of the scene transitions similar to how the White Lady water scene happened. Like, we witnessed spots of her memory walking home that just poof weren't there. And when we actually arrive, Irene is just asleep in a chair in the basement, and Julia goes to the old recording machine to get to work and to start interrogating her. But there's a problem. It's evident that Julia isn't stable, as she seems to black out more due to the stress, it seems, of the situation, and all we hear as it fades to black is a gunshot. Shaky hand. Very convincing. Oh shit, what the fuck? Hello?
What are you doing, my daughter? Why do you want to ruin your life?
I'm sorry. It wasn't me who just shot Mummy. It wasn't me. Dear God, what have I done?
And Julia exclaims, "It wasn't me." And it was genuine. Like, you cannot detect that she lied about this. To being able to see, and then she's able to access a old bedroom that she had that was locked away from her. And inside of it was a little puppet theater. And she decides to play out her memories to show like a portion of the truth of when she shot her mother. Julia dismembers her mother's body limb from limb as illustrated through like ball jointed dolls as depicting Irene. Finally, she also just buries her under the bridge. And Julia returns to develop the final images found on the camera roll she found. And in that photo she finds on the camera was actually herself, Julia, hurting her sister Martha. And at that moment when she saw that, she succumbs to her own despair. And she was gonna end it all if it wasn't for the Italian freedom fighters that just barged into the room. And also at this time, her father was also captured and bound next to her. And Julia was forced to basically tell them that he is in fact a German general. And because Julia said all of that, they shot him. And while the last task is to kill Julia, all the soldiers left but one. And that one soldier decided to spare Julia's life, leaving her. And now at this point, Julia doesn't have her sister, her mother's dead, their father's dead. Even their nanny, which we find out earlier on in the story, was killed in a bombing at the family home that she was caring for them as they stayed at her villa. So all of her family essentially is dead. And Lapo was killed early on in the story because Nazis he was fighting as an Italian freedom fighter group, they got him. And at this point, Julia had no one. Julia was alone. All she had left was to listen to the tape recording of the interrogation of Irene, her now deceased mother. And what essentially happens, she demands to know what happened and to tell her what really went down. And Irene just thought she had forgotten everything. Says she doesn't really know what she's talking about. Explains why she was so angry with her at the piano. And it was because she wasn't playing the piano so much, she was hurting herself in front of it. And that kind of caused Julia to be confused because that's not how she remembered it. And she was very stunned by the recording even saying so. And so she returns to the doll theater to play all the memories that she had long forgotten. So it starts off with watching her mother give birth and the theater scene. Julia admits that she could only recount due to remembering things that her mom and her nanny told her. We watch that and we begin to see Julia slowly realize that she's actually Martha. And in the next scene, Martha keeps begging for like various things like all child does, like I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to go pee, I want to sleep, I'm tired. And in the end, she kind of just had her mother grab the cane behind her and hit her over the head with it. And as Martha laid on the floor, her doll's clay mask shatters, revealing a stitched mouth and a scar on her head, signifying the head trauma probably brought about this split personality issue because her mom hit her on the head. Because at that time, there was no Julia in the room. There was no twin in the room. It was just Martha. And in the next scene, we see two dolls, which is Martha and Julia. At this point, you kind of start to understand that Julia is just a manifestation of Martha's trauma. Julia spoke for Martha, and Julia was on the other side who kind of came out to help protect her during dangerous environments. Martha was deaf and didn't hear and didn't listen, but when she was Julia, she would be very rebellious and speak out. And at this point, when she was Julia, she broke a vase. We watch her mother drag her to the kitchen, sit her down in a chair, and tie her up, and then beat her relentlessly. And nobody was home because father was out for the war. But you want to know who did come to help? Her pet dog rushed in. And like framed in the back of the scene of the theater was a pot of boiling water. Regrettably, Martha and Julia's mother did the worst thing imaginable and cooked the dog whole in front of her, alive, and made her eat it in the end. That kind of suffering's atrocious. Martha, Julia, was just a child. We come to find that Julia, now Martha, went to the lake after placing that note herself that we read earlier from Martha's lockbox, and sat there in anguish for her parents to find her alone. And of course, there was no twin sister. There was no corpse beside her. It was only her. It was only Martha who was convinced of this reality that she made to cope with her past, of everything that happened to her. And like in a symbolic way, Martha is or was dead. Martha was a soul that died due to the abuse that she had to endure and switched to a personality that could possibly cope for her. Her personality, her true self, was sacrificed because she opted to lose herself to survive. Her mother really did kill Martha in a metaphorical sense. Irene was responsible for all of this and why Martha had to depersonalize and formulate a more palatable life for herself to escape from the truth of the past. And you know what? The end really made me understand a few things about myself. I felt so much sympathy for Martha. I obviously don't condone her for killing her mother, but like I understand it. I kept talking to people about the game and watching the stories and the scene play out, and I had like a few of my very first visual flashbacks, like an entire full flashback. Usually my flashbacks are just feelings, smells, sounds, and touch. I never had like a visual one this intense before. And when I saw Martha getting yelled at for simple needs, I saw my birth father. I saw my memory of me getting out of bed in terror. I had an awful nightmare that night, and I remember that much, and I was really scared. I think I was even wearing diapers still at that moment, so I must have been like maybe 2, maybe younger. I was able to walk, so I know that for sure, and I was sleeping in my own bed, so maybe 2 years old. I walked out, and I was crying. I saw my father get up from his velvet green recliner as I professed that I was scared. And then he came through the hallway and struck me in the face and told me to go to bed. I remember the feeling, the burning swelling on my face. And later I noticed that I received a huge fat lip. I remember that later as a child that my mom wasn't gone anymore at night working her night job of cleaning. And she was like cleaning houses to earn money unknowingly to my father to leave him. And she chose nights, and she was confident enough that like all of us kids would stay asleep through the night and we'd be safe. And then when she saw the aftermath, she quit that job and she no longer worked nights and she stayed home. And during Martha's death, I really did ache for Martha. I know that she's fictional, but I hurt for her going through the pain that I had, and I still continued the story with other people, making small of my troubles compared to hers. And when I continued to speak and I compared myself to Martha, I started to try to find happier childhood thoughts, just because like I don't want to think like I only remember the negative, you know. I want to also show that I remember the positives of my childhood, like such as my mom making my siblings peanut butter cookies all the time, and how I accidentally ate pancake batter while being sneaky after nap time and my mom was still resting, and I thought it was cake batter. It wasn't. I tried to keep it a secret just in case I'd get in trouble for eating pancake batter. And plus it was kind of embarrassing, you know, like I was wrong. I remember that. I was like, oop. And I also reminisced about having these really cute pancake makers back in the day. They were of like Looney Tune characters. So we had like Bugs Bunny. I think we even had Wile E. Coyote, a Tasmanian devil. I think we had one more, but I can't remember. I think it was the hunter. I can't even remember his name. And then like I had a moment where I was just like, oh my God, like I got really happy and I remembered and started vocalizing my thoughts like live time. Like I did it actively without really thinking it through. First, I just said it as it was happening in my head. And I was like, oh, and I had a cat. I remember he was silver. He was kind of a big cat for how big I was, right? When I mentioned, oh, and my cat, his name was Tarzan, and I kind of stopped and I could feel my bright, warm memories that I was trying to recount become cold. And I remember the ill fate of my childhood cat, and the memories that I suppressed from back then came flooding back. I sat there at a Whataburger drive-thru, sobbing, because I was Martha. I am Martha. Not in the same context, but my childhood pet was taken from me out of spite in a horrible fashion just because we left him. And we left my father due to him trying to murder my siblings in the way that he taunted my mother, threatening. Thankfully, she caught him in time before he could haul us off in his car. And then we left him that morning when he went off to work or wherever he disappeared off to. And then later I started to remember about how when we would visit him, because obviously they divorced, we would still see him every so often. We were hungry after playing some games in the morning, and he forced us to eat cereal that was infested with hill bugs, basically little black bugs in cereal, and we asked if there was anything else to eat, and he said no. One time he got mad at me because I was 6 years old, I was going to kindergarten. I couldn't remember where my elementary school was. I thought I did, so I tried to lead him there, but I couldn't remember. And I genuinely thought it was my fault because we missed the daycare bus, and he said it was my fault. It was my fault that I was late for school because I couldn't remember how to get there. He would throw my siblings in a room and lock us in. I remember how he wouldn't bathe us or brush my hair, and that the ladies at the daycare had to help brush my matted out hair. And then like I started to remember about how he never wanted to see us, probably because my mom threatened him multiple times as she was building a case against him. That my mom wasn't negligent. She actively was there to stop everything that was happening, because when he did something, he would not do it again. And like the sad thing is as kids, we didn't know better. We still loved our father and wished that he loved us the same way that we've hoped. And when I found my dad, my real father in a sense, I was angry that my birth father didn't love me in the same regard, you know? Martha's mother, Irene, stopped hitting Martha when her father was finally around more often. My birth father stopped hitting us and mistreating us because my mother was there to stop it too. So it's like, it was the same. And even like watching Martha get institutionalized, because she did end up getting locked up in the end, and she was speaking about her experiences and how she felt and everything that she went through even in the hospital. Not all of it rang true for me, but I did identify with a lot of things. And because of my own trauma, I did disassociate a lot because of this continuous trauma, and started to kind of have derealization and stopped feeling real and connected to my own body. I may not have like a split personality, but I did similar stuff to try to cope and shield myself from like the dangerous situation at hand. And it was just basically something my brain had to do to survive all those years. You know, it's funny, not really, but my mom asked me sometime a while ago something interesting, so I'll just ask you guys as well. When did you start to feel self-aware? Like starting to do things as an individual capable of making your own choices, your own cognitive thought? I had to remember, I think my mom said she felt self-aware around 4 to 5, which kind of makes sense, you know? It's around the time you go to school and are given challenges that you have to fully think through. I asked someone else and they wagered about maybe 3 to 4 when they were playing to match the shapes with the whole toy. And I remember being asked this same question, and I always remembered being self-aware and surprised that not everybody was always self-aware. And it's not really a flex. It's not me trying to prove like I'm better than anybody that developed self-awareness late. It was me having to forcefully mentally grow up to be able to survive my own trauma and try to avoid my father's wrath. Through Martha's journey and sharing it with others, my experience, and I realized not everybody's life is a 10 like mine. Not everybody is fighting struggles like I was. And for the first time, my lie I told myself was essentially stripped away from me. I was confronted, felt more alone in this issue than I ever was. Not many people would understand my struggles through life, what I went through, and frankly, I'm so happy to know this. I know there's people people that probably had it worse than I had. And I think that's why I made such light of my own trauma, because at least it wasn't that bad, you know? Like I said earlier, this is not the trauma or pain Olympics. It's not a contest of who had it worse. It's not the intent of this message. It's just me finally finding games that gave me a way to navigate these hard issues that I thought so little of, giving me the strength to show and share my story because of these people's fictional lives. I was always worried when I told people the general background of, yeah, my father was abusive and I have trauma from it, that they think maybe I was just being dramatic. But these games, I'm sure maybe the devs didn't intend for this, but their storytelling, Buddy and Martha told me that I was validated. I felt comfort. I felt upset from how I shoved my past away and locked it away. I felt like these characters had a portion of me somehow, and I only found these games as if they were like the white lady for me, needing to tell me that I had the answers that are inside of me too, that I just have to look. I may not be Buddy and Martha in an equivocal sense, but I saw we were somehow the same. It's a lot to see a character go through things that echo, and to see them on stage, like at a stage that you're presently in life. It's hard to ignore truths that you had to endure when it's played out in front of you. Just like Buddy, I have people who love me and care for me, and even if they're gone, their love is still as strong, and I must persevere and make my own choices moving forward. And just like Martha, I am hopeful for things finally getting better and to see doors open. I just have to hope that I find them.